A happy new year. This is my first podcast in 2024. I'm going to talk about the book that I'm reading, which is Deluge. Before I go there, I just a few comments on the year, on what happened, why I'm posting on January 10th. I basically took a vacation. I was on a trip with my family from Palo Alto into the Nevada desert on the eastern Sierra side, back to California, actually, from Reno back to California. Bishop, Mount Whitney, highly recommended, beautiful place. Then Vegas, and then back through the desert. Spent a little bit of time around Lake Tahoe. Almost got stormed in. Then huge storm, snowstorm, cold front, and now I'm back. So this is my first post. There's a couple of things to talk about the market in general. I think we are looking at a pretty nervous situation as far as Tesla is concerned, and the reason for that is I think that we're expecting the guidance for the year coming at the earnings call. People are nervous about the earnings call. I think this is the reason for the underperformance. We are for the year we are up. We're actually down 4.3% in the fund. The market's up 30 basis points, around performing by 4.6%. And most of the performance comes from Tesla. We actually made some money on NVIDIA. NVIDIA is doing really well. We have year to date like 10%, which is way better than the market. So AI is alive and kicking. I think CES in Vegas is supporting generative AI. I haven't followed specific news, but our thesis on NVIDIA is just simply that the infrastructure for generative AI is only going to keep growing, and NVIDIA is incredibly well positioned, partly because they did the right things and partly because competition is just not able to catch up, in particular solving the problem of hardware accelerators, backwards compatibility with libraries and compilers. As far as Tesla is concerned, again, we have a risk here of guidance, of volume. We have Cybertruck, which is ramping relatively slow. So there are some issues there, but overall, of course, we are still incredibly happy with the company, in particular when it comes to quality and product and AI, real-world AI, robotics. This is going to be the focus of our Orange Capital Partners in 2024. In particular, how transformer architectures can help end-to-end learning in robotics. I think this is the key situation as far as robotics is concerned. I'm actually here at Stanford right now. I just attended some classes in robotics, and I'm also reviewing NeurIPS, where I think some really interesting stuff out of Berkeley came. Some of the papers there, Levine, Kumar et al. Wrote about transformers, wrote about how transformer technology, how transformer architectures can be applied to reinforcement learning, and therefore generalizable robots are, at least in principle, pretty close to possible from an engineering perspective. This is not even on podcast. It's January 10th, 2024. This is Krim Delco. Since the last update, we are down 4.3%. The market's up 30 basis points for the year. We're underperforming by 4.6%. So like I said, as far as the market is concerned, I think the prelude gave a good summary. The main risk is Tesla, and it's the guidance, the volume, expectations around 2.15 million for next year. This is in question. I think nervousness is warranted. We had 1.85 million. We had 100,000 Cybertrucks, which would be amazing if they could do that. And that still leaves us short of about 250, 300,000 3Y S and X that need to be sold. And the market's just nervous. But what's positive, of course, and I had this in the what works, what doesn't work episode towards the end of the year, it's the lower interest rates that help car sales and therefore also Tesla. Now, we had a warning by Mobileye. I haven't looked into the details. I don't think that that's a problem in any way. I think actually that's a signal for how data-driven robotics is driving these bespoke solutions, like Mobileye, these old school bespoke solutions, out of the market. Now let's talk about the book Deluge by Stephen Markley. I believe I pronounced it correctly. Deluge or Deluge, Deluge maybe. I'm not quite sure. It's a dystopian novel that is kind of real time and a little bit in the future. It's about the book is about a climate catastrophe that is awaiting us, and it's not about that in a sense that we are going through the book with the eyes of several actors from different social and social stratospheres, from different perspectives. The novel is very well crafted as far as character building is concerned, as far as seeing the world with different eyes is concerned. There's some issues that I have. I mean, Markley is a journalist, and you can sense the I've been a journalist myself, so I take the liberty to criticize the profession a bit. The superficial view on the world, in a sense that, in particular, let's say the way Markley portrays Wall Street as being a place where the masters of the universe are moving money around and changing the world. That's not a very accurate description of Wall Street. The way he portrays activism and the way he portrays authorities and the police, there's a scene in the book where, or there's actually a storyline in the book where one of the activists, one of the main protagonists of the novel, Kate Morris, seems to be doing everything right, and her opponents, the FBI and all the other agencies that fight activism, they just make some fundamental mistakes, such as, for example, having special operations troops that somehow have mother issues and end up being cowards and not able to shoot when people in such positions typically don't have issues like that. I think it's still a readable book, and it's worth reading. It opens up questions, and I think what I want to discuss today in particular is the concept of a spiritual leader, of a leader that is completely throwing facts out of the window, not just not caring about facts, but deliberately avoiding them and moving the storyline or his or her story into a conglomerate, a potpourri of nonsense and prophecies and undefinable truths that are deliberately crafted so people can follow those leaders blindly. In a nutshell, what Markley is doing here, I don't know if it's intentional or not, he's creating a couple of scenarios that show how something like Donald Trump is possible. And he's showing also, I think in a very clever way, and again, it might be even not intentional. Let's say one of the protagonists, Kate Morris, actually a female, with a very different background than Donald Trump, turns into the same type of person, an egocentric person that sacrifices people around her with no remorse or anything, just to push her own ego, and has a lot of followers because in this case she's using climate change in the worst possible way as a conduit for her own political power. And what I mean with worst possible way is that if you combine, let's say, climate change with fairness and economic equity and things along those lines, you're certainly not going to solve the actual problem, which is real, which is that we're pumping too much carbon in the atmosphere. If you start combining that with, for example, the problem of young kids going to school and not having proper education, and then maybe also people of different race not having access to the job market or college education. Those are not related problems. They can't be combined. So this Kate Morris is exactly doing that. And that's, of course, a very prolific way for leaders any sort, whether it's right or left wing, to garner support and get the kind of followership that they want, which is blindly just following without asking questions, which in this case leads to a catastrophe, which is to some extent her fault, but of course also to some extent the fault of others. I don't want to give too much away in the book. You should read it. But again, I think what's interesting about this character, Kate Morris, is that she's actually, again, a very different type of background than somebody like Donald Trump or some right-wing leader somewhere, or left-wing leader somewhere else. But she has those characteristics that are canonical about those types of people. There's another character here, a prophet type person, a priest, right-wing, Christian type priest, fits more into the stereotype of what you would expect. But again, what's shocking or interesting or maybe scary is how similar those characters are, whether it's right or left. So this is what I wanted to talk about here in the first part of the Deluge conversation. I think the book is really scratching a lot of nerves in me. I am questioning myself in many different ways how I feel about these types of characters. Let's take Kate Morris as an example. On the one hand, I support uprisings as far as they challenge the status quo, no matter from what political party and from what social background those people are, because I'm a strong believer in iteration, in democracy as a system that gives power to other systems, or that transitions power without violence. So in that sense, we need opposition, and Kate Morris is opposition. What I absolutely disagree with is the notion of nonviolent protest. There's no such thing as nonviolent protest. Every protest is violent by definition, and whether it's whether you actually go to arms and fight a street fight or a battle or whatever, or whether you, let's say, blockade a street, you are still violent. Blockading a street inhibits the people who live on that street. It takes people's opportunity away from making a living. It prevents, ER ambulances to get to old people or sick people to save their lives. So no matter what you do as a protester, as a disruptor, as a chaos producer, you're going to have violence attached to it. And I'm not even mentioning the almost certain risk, or it's not even a risk, it's a certainty that when you have something like an uprising, whether it's declared violent or not, you're going to have violence, because that's just human nature. So this non-violent protest is an oxymoron, and I think that's where it rubs me off the wrong way. The self-righteous hypocrisy of those people who claim to fight for the climate, but in reality only want to enhance their own profile and help their own cause and things along those lines. I'm not saying all of them are like that, but the leadership in this particular book is portrayed like that. The leadership of the sort of left-wing opposition, climate change fighting type organization, those types of people, they have all that stereotype that Markley is somehow, unfortunately, or maybe intentionally portraying, which is this, on the one hand, we're fighting for the climate. On the other hand, of course, we don't mind flying around in airplanes and proliferating ourselves into stardom or political and economic power, while, of course, everybody else has to shorten their rations and tighten their belts and things like that. So there's definitely there's a lot of stereotypes in this book, which I would put as a negative. But again, Markley's a journalist. That's unfortunate. That comes with the trade. He's not a novelist in a sense of a Cormac McCarthy, who writes similar dystopian type books, I would say, in a much more crafty way. Nevertheless, again, this is definitely worth reading. I don't want to be negative on Markley, but again, this is just a criticism. I wanted to discuss this spirituality thing, this leadership, political uprising, and those types of dynamics that are portrayed in the book. And I think, as a conclusion, I think I find it very interesting and noteworthy how a character like in this book, Kate Morris, really turns out to be just another Donald Trump. And you can see how the risk of such a person is looming everywhere, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Kate Morris, whether it's somebody like Anthony Fauci or people like that who took advantage of COVID. Whether they did it intentionally in the beginning or not doesn't even matter, but they grew into a powerful position that they couldn't resist, and they started doing things that were incredibly harmful to a lot of people in the name of protecting people from harm, which is the irony. And this is exactly what is happening here in this climate situation that is portrayed in the novel Deluge, or Deluge. Excuse me, I really don't know how to pronounce it properly. But I guess I also want to finish this episode with just one more comment, and that is that one thing that the book really, really brings across to me personally is that the problem of climate change is huge, that we have to be incredibly careful, and we can learn from COVID. We cannot commingle the issues. The issue with climate change is simply that we're pumping too much carbon in the atmosphere. We have to find alternatives for that, and that can only be done by substituting our energy infrastructure with better decarbonized energy, but by offering better technology and better innovation and more science towards solutions that not just help us solve the carbonization problem, but also create opportunities for people in all kinds of classes for jobs and wealth creation. This is the only way out, and this book is, from my point of view, a very good example of how we have to be very uncompromising when it comes to this climate change issue. First and foremost, there's no such thing as a climate change problem. That's not the problem. The antidote of climate change is no climate change, and that doesn't exist. What we have is a problem of carbonization of the atmosphere, and we need to decarbonize our economy, and we can do that with technology and science. And we have to do this in a non-coercive way, with innovation, with entrepreneurship, and not with coercion, like this book has a lot of protagonists that are suggesting very dangerous policies, something like a Fed for carbon, things like that. And that we have to absolutely put aside. And we have to go the path of innovation, for example, like Tesla is doing with electric cars, with solar power, with storage, with batteries, with material science. That is the path forward towards a more sustainable energy infrastructure. And decarbonization is a good problem because we can measure it and we can solve it. Climate change is not a good problem because we don't know exactly what it actually is. Thank you.